looks like at 10.
This meeting is,
I'm sorry.
8:30.
They got
We changed it.
We changed it. We just changed it.
Third Thursday at 8:30?
Yes. Right here in this room.
we set to go yet?
Sorry, yes.
Okay. Okay, this meeting today is just on cemeteries. We've covered this in a couple of previous meetings. The last time around, it was requested maybe Kate and Shauna rework the, what we had at the present time, at that time. They did send out, both Kim and I think Shauna too, sent out the cemetery chapter 45 to everybody. So they had a chance to review it before we had this meeting. So we might as well move forward. Does anybody have any comments to make before we start talking about cemeteries? If not, you had a hand in this too, right?
I did.
Okay.
I have a hand in it. Kate and I worked on it. Lee has had a lot of input as well. Yeah. We started off with a pretty substantial document, and it's really kind of been tailored down quite a bit. With the thought that once we, or if we do have a committee, that ultimately they will kind of set, they'll have some parameters, but they'll set really their goals and what they want to work on. This is a really, we think, a great place to start. We've all been involved for the most part, and looking at the drafts, that first one that Doug provided. So again, this is scaled back. I mean, are there questions? I don't want to read it to you, but I mean, are there any?
I have a couple minor comments.
Okay.
I guess I want to say 45-3C. Again, it was just a question. Why the planning board and zoning board or any town committee? I just, in my years being involved, I don't know if we've ever had any need to have the cemetery committee be involved with the zoning board or the planning board, or that was just a general question. And if it's just standard language that we thought we'd add to it, that's okay as an answer also.
I believe it was just a way to incorporate the specific boards that would potentially see some type of a request that might have something to do with a cemetery or historic site. So that we just wanted to not eliminate any boards. If we didn't want it to say, oh, we can't have the zoning board.
Yeah. Okay. The next paragraph, 45-4. I don't know if I'm very comfortable with having 2 outside members from outside the town be on the committee or be allowed to be on the committee.
Is your concern that it's 2, or is your concern that we're having others from outside the committee come in?
Yes.
Others.
Yes.
So Kate and I discussed this at length, thinking that, I don't know how to word this, that we may have, or we probably do have many residents and non-residents outside of the town that have family, that have a stake, that have an interest in our cemeteries. So that's why we included that. So, the surrounding community members who, have an interest of some sort in the cemeteries here.
Well, that makes some sense to me in terms of getting input from people outside of the community, but I don't think that people from outside of the community ought to be
spending town money.
Spending town money. Yeah, thank you. You made that very concise for me.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I recall there's a gentleman actually that Leaf had mentioned who has extensive training and education in cemeteries, and he is not a town resident. So this was just the first suggestion to try to incorporate as well people who have a stake and an interest, but also have some really great experience and education that they could bring to the committee. But there are certainly other ways we could write this. We could write in perhaps advisors to the committee. There also was a thought of Cody at the Historical Society, who also isn't a resident of the town, and allowing him to participate. So I think the initial proposal has the majority stake of 3 members all being town residents, so that any non-town resident wouldn't be able to have a majority say, but it can certainly be revised upon your suggestions to include just advisors rather than these as members, if you feel that's more appropriate.
I certainly do. I mean, I don't know if you have to put in black and white that there can be advisors from outside of the community. I'm okay. Advisors, however you want to do it, but I don't think voting members should be people from outside of the town. I don't know. I'm just one member, so I don't know how does everybody else feel.
It would probably be unique anyhow to have this situation,
Mhm.
but I don't know. I'm not violently opposed to some outsider, but it'd be obviously be somebody that had a stake or an interest in it. And if they're interested, we're probably gonna have a hard time populating this as it is. It might,
When we redid the site design manual, we had an outsider, a fellow from the city, but it was more based on his expertise.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy was an engineer and certainly fit in. Of course, we weren't spending money. We were creating policy, but we weren't spending money. But I could certainly see the expertise. I know Letha said, I think there were 2 individuals who were potentially experienced in
I'm not sure, are the
administration of
West,
cemetery.
is it the West that he was, Kate,
Yeah.
the West couple, Mr. and Mrs. West, are they, I know he mentioned them, I don't know if are they residents?
They are town residents,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
I think this was in particular Cody, and then a gentleman named Doug Stone as well that he had spoke with.
so
But again, I do believe we did write in that it was specific with education and experience, as well as granting agency experience. And we can make that more clear, or we can readjust, absolutely.
So the comment was made about spending money. So no committee of the town of Canandaigua was authorized to spend money without the approval of the town board, none, 0. So this committee can't just go spending money. The town board has 100% oversight. So the second thing is the LDC, we actually had written the bylaws so that a person who's appointed has to have an affiliation with Canandaigua, the town specifically of Canandaigua. So either they're a business owner in Canandaigua, they're a landowner in Canandaigua, whether or not they're a resident, right? Because that's the other thing that you run into is you may have landowners that aren't necessarily residents of Canandaigua. And then like Kate was saying, like Doug Stone is a perfect example. He's very, very knowledgeable. He is the executive director of the Woodlawn Cemetery, right? Knows tons and tons of stuff. And so if having him involved, I mean, that could be an awesome thing, but if we're going to write it so strict that it would preclude his involvement, that may not, we might need to think about that. So
That makes sense.
Well, probably even, oh, I'm sorry.
Can I say, maybe these people should have shorter terms? Like an annual, biannual appointment, rather than the 4 or 5 years?
you made a good point, Doug.
Yeah.
They're not spending the money, and we have people in the community who are not residents that certainly have the expertise. And wouldn't be involved unless they had an interest and an expertise. So,
but the word, maybe it could be wordsmith for the Canandaigua community affiliation,
Yeah.
somehow.
Because if a funeral director wanted to get involved or something like that, I think both of them probably live in town,
Right,
so they'd be.
I could look at the bylaws too for the LDC. Do you want to, we could pull from that? Whether it's crafted, or at least look at it.
I don't want to delay things. just because of that issue. You know, and I think Doug makes a very good point, and I understand, and I'm comfortable with. Maybe we just say some town affiliation or something, just to kind of put it to close.
Mhm.
And then in the same paragraph, the other thing I did not understand, and I just asking for clarification, why could the town historian or former town historian be on the board, a member of the committee? Why not?
Oh, it's a non-voting.
Yeah,
position.
yeah, why? I don't, I think that they would be very beneficial or have a lot to contribute. And I
That's-
think,
Yeah, that was specifically actually a request of Leaf because he felt he didn't want to take up a seat from someone who was a member of the community or direct kind of the movement of the committee. So
But I-
he had
but I think-
requested it be that way, but I don't think there's any requirement.
yeah, I think, Kate, we could just put may serve as a voting member and just leave it at that, right? Don't exclude them, but they don't have to be also.
Okay, absolutely.
Because I mean, I think sometimes their input could be very valuable. So that was the only comments I had. I mean, just a couple of minor little things. So other than that, I was very comfortable.
I have a general question. Of the, I believe, 8 cemeteries within the town, how many other than Pine Bank have eligible holes or plats? Or whatever?
Academy, I
Just
believe.
Academy.
Academy
Yeah.
is,
It's the
so
only one.
Academy and Pine Bank,
Pine
which the town doesn't at this point have responsibility for. Okay.
Yeah.
And I was looking at the fee schedule. The $500 to bury somebody whole. Is that because we send a guy with a backhoe? Or does an undertaker?
We have to open at Academy when those happen. We have to actually, our highway department goes down and
So the $500 is to cover the equipment, the guy, and so on. So there is no thought of perpetual care.
you mean charging
Yeah.
the person that's.
So what we're paying for is to bury somebody on a given date, but no consideration to the responsibility that the state has made of the municipality to mow this in perpetuity, which is way too long, with no financing. What I'm getting at, I'd rather chase people to a for-profit cemetery or to be cremated and tossed out in the lake than to increase the burden on the taxpayers.
We're gonna mow those areas anyway, so I don't understand the real issue.
Well, yeah, you're
I
mowing.
think there's only a few.
Yeah, there was.
I'd like to
Class
see,
what?
I'd like to see the people that are sleeping there to pay the freight.
Well, how are you gonna get the ones that are buried 100
It's
years?
too
ago?
late. They made a mistake and we're not gonna do it
Or
anymore.
you're gonna put the whole burden on the few that are still remaining
Uh,
to mow the whole cemetery? Or is it just their plot?
I'd like to see it. I'd like, first of all, like to, it's a philosophical thing, discourage people from,
Well, that's the whole
yeah,
thing.
you know.
That's your whole position. really.
And why in perpetuity, the town is gonna carry the burden of preserving what's supposedly historic, but you can go to the historical society and know who's buried there without fixing the stones, which we apparently picked up the freight for. I just like to see, and I have seen in other old cemeteries where they are charged a significant fee where it does provide for perpetual care.
It's kind of tough to go back and set that up. And all
Yeah,
these
it's
cemeteries.
the horse is out of the barn here, but does even $500 cover the cost of digging a hole in the equipment and so on?
Approximately, that's where that came
Probably
from.
a break even.
Yeah, very good. We don't, there are no plots for sale at Academy, so there's no way for anyone, like, for instance, say I wanted to be buried in one of the cemeteries in town, the only option I would have would be Pine Bank Cemetery.
Well, you could be buried in Wolverton, but it's gonna cost you a hell of a lot.
There
you go.
Well, that's a private.
Available real estate.
John probably has a layaway fund. You know, so.
Nice for you.
Layaway.
Okay, that, just my thought. I thought it was too cheap, but it doesn't, all it does is cover the cost of digging a hole. Yeah.
And I think it just involves a very few. I don't know, as Leaf ever mentioned the number, but he said it was the only place that they had availability at the present time, and they were already owned by a
And they're
family.
not a hell of a lot, right?
Yeah.
Available, right?
Right.
So like,
What else, here's on the last remake of the cemeteries. You're set with yours, right, John?
Yeah, I think, just in going back in summary. I guess who reside in at least 3 of whom reside in the town. And the others must have some interest in the town. How do you want,
Some affiliation.
an affiliation with the town?
Mhm.
Or
And-
or special interest.
Okay, and the last sentence there, just serve it to say may serve as a voting member. And I'll make a motion that we approve this with those couple of notations.
Motion made, is there a second?
I'll second for discussion. I had a
Okay.
couple of things.
Oh, I'm sorry, did you have others, Tom?
No, just for discussion, that's fine. And item M. What is it? I don't know. It's the second to last page, talking about strict following or strictly prohibitive within cemetery grounds. Don't we have some general code that says you don't do certain things on town property? I guess what I'm asking is this redundant with other rules in the town?
that was one of the reasons for originally doing this, is we don't have anything at all for cemeteries currently. That was, remember going back to the original conversation, that was one of the things when this originally came to me and I started researching, I was like, oh, oops.
So there's no generic rule that I can't, for instance, go and hunt on yourself.
So there is a hunting law on town property. You can't
Okay.
hunt, right?
How about picnicking? How about walking my dog? So that's pretty dumb. We should have an overall rule on town property. But okay, so it's not redundant with other
It's really,
existing rules.
it's
Okay.
really not. And
Okay. I'm just trying to simplify things. Seems like kind of.
Chuck, you had something else you wanted to add?
Yeah,
or what?
I was just a little confused as to the difference between rules and regulations and preservation. I assume the rules and regulations are pertaining to cemetery, what pre-interment, I guess, so to
Right,
speak, yeah, okay.
right.
Chuck, are
Where
you
the-
referring to something specifically on this? or-
No, it's just
just
in
general?
general. I mean, you have two chapters or two articles, one's preservation, which is yet to be determined as far as what it's gonna say, and in the previous draft, it was mostly about headstones and
It was very detailed.
all that kind of stuff, which I guess what you're saying is that it'll be up to the committee to come up with those rules and regulations, or preservation procedures.
Right, absolutely.
Where the rules and regulations, which are spelled out in the draft. Just wanna make sure we've got the rules and regulations in one tier, and the preservation, anything that has to do once the interment has occurred, and the protection or the sustainability of the property itself, that those kind of things regarding headstone. I noticed we took out the reference to headstones, how they should be, what they should be, how they should be maintained.
Most of that section we had already kind of taken out. Remember that first draft, there was a big chunk we removed. That was all that preservation piece of it. So that, all that was really left in that was like if someone wanted to hold an event in the cemetery, that kind of thing. Because you guys had actually asked us to take out a lot of that chapter previously.
Okay, and that, as we said before, that would be up to the committee to determine if in any of that, if those requirements be included at some point in the future.
Right.
Okay.
So does that mean this will be back?
No, I think we're putting the burden on the committee
Right.
to come up with the preservation.
Yeah, but will they be able to just add that in without going through the ordinance committee?
No, you'll see it again.
It'll be
We're gonna
back.
see this again?
Well,
Yeah.
if the committee
do
was
it
to
again.
make changes or additions,
If the
Then-
committee,
the
Once.
cemetery committee wants to do
if
that.
they are comfortable with it the
They're
way it
good.
is, and we don't have to see this anymore, right?
Right.
Okay, then I'm willing to,
Is that a nomination for the committee, John?
No,
you have a horse in the race.
the what?
You have a horse in the race.
Yeah.
Yeah,
With
right.
your
Yeah, right.
military, yeah.
Well, I heard their comment about if someone wanted to have a party, and I was gonna say, if we wanted to have a Halloween party up at Wolverton, we could probably
do that.
make arrangements for that too.
Oh, this is fun.
Can make it a dog park. I'm willing to stay with the draft as written, knowing that at some point in the future that the committee will review or come up with the preservation guidelines. Also, I guess, consider what's in here as far as rules and regulations and see
How
if they
they would-
cross
Mhm.
and how they mix, because like I said, some of those rules and regulations could be considered preservation
Absolutely.
items.
Well, Chuck, I think in response to your comment, if the committee wanted to preserve headstones, the way I read it, they'd have to go and develop a budget and develop a process for wanting to do that, right? And then they'd have to bring it to the town board for approval,
Mhm.
right?
Right, and that they also will have the ability to look for grants.
So kind of in response
way.
to your comment, Chuck, I think that's the way I see it.
True. But we originally, in the original draft, we went so far as to say what kind of headstone it had to be. It had to be flat, you know.
Right, but we
had
would,
to be
I
repaired.
think there was a lot of concern expressed by this committee about the particulars of that and whether we were going to develop budgets associated with that, et
Mhm.
cetera. And that's kind of why we moved in a different direction and said that if the committee, cemetery committee, decided they wanted to go and move forward with the preservation of some headstones, they'd have to develop a process and a budget for doing that and submit it to the town board for approval. Is how I kind of remember that whole,
Existing headstones.
yeah.
New headstones would be the expense of the family, right? I think,
Absolutely.
yeah.
But the parameters for what new would look like is what you're talking about too.
I think,
What we took out.
yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think John's looking at existing headstones, upright headstones. that are
preservation and,
Old, and we do we want
yeah.
to preserve them. and
Right.
All that, yeah, that would have to go through a budgeting process and money would have to be approved for it.
Right.
As far as someone coming in with a new interment, the type of headstone to be put on the grave, that's something, again, the committee can come up with the minutia of what it should be and how it should be developed. So,
Well, the other thing that happens, we've had, I would say on average, 3 to half a dozen times a year, a family member will come in and they're doing some sort of genealogical research and they discover they have a family member in one of these cemeteries and they want to replace the headstone. So, and at their expense. So then even having the committee to be able to work with them to
Yeah.
make sure it's in alignment, that type of stuff. Because we have had that happen. I know, I think it was last year or the year before, somebody replaced 5 headstones at Academy.
Did they have to replace it with a flush?
Yeah, they replaced it. They chose exactly. Yeah, but there are no real guidelines to guide on what it is.
That's why we're here.
Right.
Okay. All right, I'm ready to move forward.
Now, we're at a point where we have a motion from John.
I second
Do
it.
you want
You
to
second
withdraw it or?
No.
Okay.
I think we're.
Oh,
On that, okay.
We discussed it.
And so we have a motion, a second, and any further discussion? Not, then we'll vote on it. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no, nay. Carried. One question that we didn't address, so was Karen over here where she said that, maybe we ought to shorten the terms of the committee members. What's the feeling on that?
Not the committee members,
The non-town resident.
Oh, the
members.
non-town resident? Oh, okay, I'm sorry, misunderstood you.
So
Yeah, I don't think we need to do.
just voted to approve
Just
it.
so we don't see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you got
So,
some
um,
outsider that's interested. You
That's a
gotta have
good
their
thing.
heart in it anyways.
I mean, the concern we have was, can we fill the committee and say,
Yeah. that's-
Well, according to
that's-
Leith, they're
that's
gonna
the
ask them
bigger
that last
issue.
meeting, he said they had plenty of people available too.
Gonna have to be well paid.
Right. So we're pretty well set on this, other than,
Karen, you okay with leaving it as is?
Yeah, you might run into somebody who's just totally inactive and doesn't participate, but,
I think we already have something, do we not, Doug, where people are inactive on committees that they automatically are removed after a short period of time?
Well, there's state law that actually dictates what can and can't be done. And you might remember a few years ago, I had to ask the town board to hold a public hearing on the removal of a member following state law. And we actually had to remove a member after a public hearing because they were inactive and I couldn't get them to resign.
What's that, East,
It was
ECB?
ECB, yeah.
I don't think this would be the committee to get that deep, but maybe.
Well, so the state law does dictate like if that was to happen, right? And so then that becomes a town board action.
If the person wasn't willing to resign.
Strange thing, I mean,
And the individual
they're not
is
active, but they
attorney.
won't resign.
Right.
I mean, that's.
It's very bizarre.
Really?
Usually, I think that's an
Well,
anomaly,
yeah.
and that's the
Well,
only
right.
time I've ever seen that happen with any of the municipalities that I've been involved with. It was a weird situation. But normally, you're having those communications and conversations, and the person's like, yeah, I just don't have time for this, or whatever the case.
Does anybody have anything else to say before we adjourn today's meeting?
I guess we concluded we have a committee now.
Just in terms of future topics, Gary, do we have anything that is imminent that
I'm
we
gonna
need to
get
talk
with
about?
Sean and we'll go over the list and see, what we've, had in the past and go from there.
Because the zoning board wanted to talk about,
I've got
refresh my
3
memory.
things. The zoning board wanted to talk about pervious
Oh, yes,
versus
pavers.
impervious
Pervious and
surfaces and
impervious,
pavers.
yes.
Chris Jensen and I are working on driveway, private drive, public right of way, private right of way, kind of cleaning some things up. That'll be coming to you. And accessory dwellings, something that we're kind of talking a little bit about.
So
On
maybe I'll
lots.
expound a little bit on the permeable pavers and
Sure, yeah, because you and I need to get together to,
because
Come up
at the last zoning board of appeals meeting, we had another permeable versus impermeable issue come before us, and the committee unanimously thinks that we ought to reconsider providing some motivation for our residents that are doing modifications and or building new to use permeable pavers as opposed to using solid surfaces or hardscapes. And trying to give them some motivation to do that. I know we talked about it a little bit up front or before, and we kind of said, well, we'll let the ZBA deal with it on a case by case basis, but this is becoming a pretty common occurrence and a common discussion that is coming before the ZBA. And additionally, it comes before the ECB quite often, and the ECB darn near on every application that we see at the zoning board or at every variance at the zoning board level. The ECB recommends the use of permeable pavers as a potential solution or alternative to some of the situations that the town is being faced with. So again, unanimously, we thought that it ought to be taken up again at our level, this committee level. That's just kind of giving you a little background about.
In that case you were talking about, that was the grass grids, remember?
The grids.
down on-
Yeah,
Sandy Beach.
that came up a couple meetings ago.
Which
if I
is
remember.
another way of designing things. I mean, it's different than pervious, it's different than traditional pervious pavements. It's different than obviously an impervious pavement. And it's something that I think Chris Jensen's allowing as is not being considered a structure, right?
Right,
Okay, so it does not count toward the lot coverage,
right, but those are the
the
grassy
grass grids.
grids with the significant base, yeah,
Certainly
so they can
a
hold.
good option.
It's a whole new technology that we've seen.
Right, but I'm
It's
not sure
legit
how
grass.
that's, because the definition of structure of the town code is anything affixed to the ground as a structure. Per definition of the town board of the town of Canandaigua. So that sounds like to me, that's a pretty in-depth conversation. The other one also is the driveway piece. And just make you guys aware of it. I'm very concerned about that because we now have a precedent in part because of a variance determination or a variance decision by the zoning board, in part because of a previous determination, where I think there's 2 or 3 cases now in the town of Canandaigua where somebody's been able to subdivide off of a private driveway. So think of it like this. Terry's house sits back, Terry, your house sits back, what, 300 feet
Yeah.
plus or minus from the road? Okay, let's say our minimum lot frontage says it's 200 feet or 100 feet, right? Based on that determination, Terry could come in and make an application to subdivide his front yard off and sell it because he's got 300-foot long driveway and he could get 3 lots. That's
Off of the driveway?
off of the
Yes.
driveway. There's a problem that issue, I would say, is
Huge
one of your
problem.
most pressing matters
Mhm.
that needs to be addressed.
So refresh my memory. When did that come before us?
Oof,
That
it
is,
was a couple of years ago.
that,
Okay. Because
that
it's not on
instance
tip of my
was
mind.
on Analinda.
Yep.
Then you denied the one on Dugway, which
That
was
was
a
the-
couple weeks ago,
Flag
or
lot.
months ago, the
Couple-
flag lot.
That-
Now
yeah.
that's coming back. Not to the ZBA, but to the
And I
planning
was very
board.
surprised that we denied that one, but we did.
Right, based on precedent of the flag lots, but that's coming back now with the applicant asking the planning board. It's coming back as a subdivision with the applicant asking the planning board to waive the requirement of frontage on a public right of way. Now they're asking for their frontage to be on a private drive.
That's to your point.
That's exactly.
That's
the
so
point,
based
right?
on precedent,
Right, now, here's the thing is precedent will carry in a court of law up until the town board changes the code.
Mhm.
So if the town board revisits this, the ordinance committee revisits this and makes a recommendation to the town board, if there's any change, that nixes those precedents. So that's why I say this one might need to be revisited and you
As
guys
sooner
might
than
need to
later.
have some additional conversation to clean that up.
If I could toss in, I think John's original comments probably have got to do with percentage of lot coverage where we've got a small lot with a large home being proposed.
correct?
Not
Right.
exclusively though,
But
Tom,
often,
but often,
Yeah.
yes.
and
It's either building or lot coverage that
Well,
becomes the issue.
10 years ago, when we looked at, I don't know, it's 10 years, whenever it was, we tried to make accommodations for different size, 3 different sized lots
Yep.
in the RLD.
Yep.
And what's acceptable lot coverage, and perpetually, you guys in the ZBA are confronted with the homeowner or the lot owner that's got too big of aspirations for the size of the lot they bought.
Yes,
And then it's
no question.
then
but
it's to you guys, how do we be good neighbors? How do we accommodate them? How do we overcome the fact that all the neighbors have got too big a house on their lots already.
No question, that is
I don't know,
some of the
I don't know
issue.
if we're ever gonna solve that problem.
However, Tom, many instances, we're only talking percentages, single digit percentage points.
Right.
And from the ZBA perspective, if we could go and tell somebody, look, if you use permeable pavers on your driveway, we'll count, pick a number for discussion, 50% of that as permeable space. And then it takes a lot of those projects that are coming before the ZBA wouldn't even be there. And in addition to that, it really serves the area ecologically better if we can encourage residents to install the permeable pavers rather than hardscape, whatever that may be, asphalt or concrete or whatever the case may be. But and you heard some of the conversation. Am I
Mhm.
saying that?
Yeah, that's
Accurately?
absolutely accurate. Mhm.
But ultimately, we end up with. And it's a matter of. Not sure what's it a matter of, but we end up with having too big a home, not too
Right.
small a lot.
It's,
Because we've made an accommodation,
it's a way
and
to get
given them a
around it.
workaround,
Mhm.
when. Whether you had more permeable area, you still got it less overall, because we've given
We've
them a free
taken one
pass on the
for,
driveway.
yeah,
Well, they take that piece and turn it into a house.
yes. Right. Or
So
patio or-
is it ecologically sound that we played a game to work, give them a workaround? I don't know. We have way too many small lots in this town where people want to build big houses. It's a perpetual problem, and they'll find another workaround. I'm all for permeable surfaces.
Mhm.
And those things where it look like concrete blocks that are on their side where the grass grows are a wonderful idea, and we've seen them work. But it's still a workaround as far as putting a monster house on a small lot. And what does the town want? And are you really interested in ecology, or are we interested in accommodating mega mansions on teeny lots?
Well, yes, and I understand your point, your
Yeah.
questions. The reality is though, that from the ZBA perspective and the ECB perspective, I would say generally speaking, if the percentages are single digits and the person shows a true concern for preserving the environment
With other things that they're doing on the lot.
with other things they're doing in a lot, generally speaking, it ends up getting approved. That's been the
Yeah,
history,
that's-
so.
Mhm.
And everything is cumulative, every little.
Yeah.
That's true.
Every little.
Yep.
Accommodation here and
We
there.
discussed this at a meeting, probably, I know it's during COVID because it was a Zoom meeting, we talked about forests. And I think the concern I had was what type of impervious pavement are they gonna put in? I mean, how's it gonna be designed? Are they going through the proper geotechnical considerations of the soil underneath and all that kind of
That's a
stuff?
big deal.
And do we come up with a standard for Canandaigua, or do we allow it to the discretion of the engineer to do that determination, that geotech determination, and come up with the design and include that? And I think the way we're handling the planning board, if someone says they're putting permeable pavers in, we require that standard or that design be put on the plan.
Right, the detail.
Right,
Mhm.
and also a statement that it'll be maintained to that standard to be able to have the porosity that, you know, we're allowing for
Ideally,
and
right.
initially, and it's continued over time as it fills up with silt and debris and it has to be maintained. So I guess that it's more than just saying we allow for porous pavement. What type of pavement do we allow for?
And also if it's not one for one, it can't be.
Right.
That's something we really
Yeah.
need to look at, that percentage. It can't be one
It's
for
gonna
one.
take some discussion.
Mhm.
Is there any ranking of, merit of the various types of, these porous pavers as a general
Mhm.
class? Is there any national organization that rates these,
Yeah.
one better than another.
Well, again, it depends on the subsoil. If your
That's-
subsoil,
That's a big.
if your
big issue.
subsoil is clay, it's just,
Nothing
it's not gonna soak anything up. If your soil, silt, clay, and a little bit of this, each type of subsoil has a different design standard. So again, we're putting the onus on the engineer to come up with a design that they show in the plan, and the homeowner realizes that that's how it's to be installed, so it's part of the permitting process, and also it has to be maintained.
Do they have to show, as part of that, do they have to show what that subsoil is like, so that this will work, given that you have this down? Do they have to do
Given the
soil
subsoil
boring?
you have, this is how much
Depth and,
subbase
Yeah.
or porous subbase or subbase with voids you need, whether it's 18 inches or you need just 6 inches. The better the subsoil, the less the subgrade, I guess is what we call
But
it.
the engineering people have to characterize that, they have
Yes.
to show what it is, so.
Just to,
And the porosity of the pavers and all that.
just piggybacking on what you're saying, generally speaking, my history has been that the manufacturer provides a detail as to what the subsoil, the sub base will be, as
Which is usually
opposed
what the
to,
engineer realizes.
right, as opposed to an engineer building this house or designing this house, puts together this, they generally use the base as prescribed by the manufacturer.
But they do actually do borings or something like that to characterize what's down there? Or do they just guess
Yeah.
what's down there?
Yeah,
Do they?
they should.
I mean, they should, no, that's my
that's something I
question.
think we should,
Do they?
that's a good, if we do this,
Yeah.
to add that, a soil report, a geotechnical report.
Mhm.
Yeah, they should, but I mean, do they? That's the question I was having.
Usually there's geotech samples taken for the house itself, so they're usually on the lot taking, geotech samples, and usually get an idea what, now maybe specifically where the driveway is or where this, this structure of permeable pavement's gonna be. They may not have samples right there, but they have a general idea of what the source is. But you can make it a requirement.
Right,
too.
and.
And I
maybe
think
they
a
should
lot
be
of, like
permitted
John's saying, a lot of
differently.
the manufacturer standards require that be done to then determine based on the manufacturer standards.
Whoever
what
makes the
what
product.
cross-section of
Says
the
how it's to be
the
put
pavement
in.
should look like.
Yeah, they don't want someone coming back and.
So I guess, to sort
Like
of
how long does
wrap it
that-
up,
Yeah.
as we discussed previously, it's more than just
We're actually getting right down into the soil here now. So
getting into the dirt,
we're past the weeds and.
into the roots.
When we're talking about this, I'm thinking about how many times the ECB said, well, geez, we recommend rain gardens.
Mm,
And
Oh,
I
yeah.
wonder how many 5 years later are still being maintained correctly.
probably not.
And, where the town gave them a free pass on something because of the trade-off, and it's continued monitoring is impossible.
Mhm.
Well, you had a car retailer, remember,
Oh,
it
Randy,
was,
yeah,
it was porous asphalt, and that, that was part of the design. He proposed it, then he went and sealed it 5 years later.
Oh,
I mean, put a
yeah, within 2 years.
oh,
It's like sealing your driveway. There goes the porosity. Anyway, yeah, Eric he had a spreadsheet with all the,
Right, we do, yeah.
the to-do list and,
yeah, we have.
okay, you
Yeah.
got that, okay,
I think driveways is number
Definitely,
one.
yeah.
yeah. Oh, the
And
private
we're getting-
driveway, yeah.
We're getting inundated by this question. I
Got a
think
lot of them
every
out there
week.
already.
Well, I've got one now where the Shotlands are and on Menteith Drive. To me, that's a corner lot, the corner lot of Menteith and 16.
Mhm.
But it's a private drive.
The one going back to their house,
Mhm.
not the garage, the house,
Going back to the.
on the
on
east side or
the-
west side of
on
the road?
East side. Not the waterfall,
Yeah, the
the
other
other
side.
one. I think that's the corner lot there. Well, they have 4 or 5 lots on Menteith Drive. to me, that's a corner lot where Menteith comes down and they're on 16 on the north and south. But it says it's a private drive. What is it? Can we have corner lots on private drives? Does it have to be a public road?
Doesn't it depend on where the driveway is coming off of the private drive or on 16 or on 16?
In that case, one of the roads at the corner is public, it's 16.
What, 16, I would say
Yeah,
is
well,
a public.
All right.
Menteith Drive is
It's
private, but it still makes that a corner lot.
So,
Is it? Is it
No,
not?
I would say it's not.
so are you, just for my clarification, are we talking about subdividing off of a private driveway? Is that the issue?
Absolutely.
That's the issue.
That's that issue
That's-
right now. And then
So if-
Dugway is
I
same
think the
same
latter
deal.
So can I just expand on that a little bit?
Yeah.
So if you have a private driveway and you subdivide off that private driveway, doesn't that private driveway become ownership of everything that's subdivided off of it? So in other words, if you had, we were talking about Terry's driveway as an example. So his driveway currently is 300 feet long, roughly. And let's say he wanted to subdivide and have 2 or 3 houses off of that private drive.
In the front,
Yes,
yep, okay.
that private drive then becomes ownership by all of those subdivisions, right? All of those 3 or 4 properties.
A common driveway.
The common driveway,
Common
thank you. Good word.
driveway, often without any sort of
Standards,
maintenance agreement, standards,
how to be built, how wide.
right, how wide, what
I
detail.
mean, we have a standard for a private road.
That's the thing, we have
Okay.
private road.
So
but
then wouldn't it
private
become,
None of our
driveway.
private
It's like,
driveways or roads.
like on Linda.
so doesn't
Well,
it become,
that's-
at that point,
It's coming to a head.
doesn't it become almost a homeowners association issue?
Right next to me, just south of me, there's 4, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 houses up behind me on the hill. And
Off of
off of Middle Cheshire
Middle
Road.
Cheshire.
And they do have their own kind of loose association for maintaining that driveway. It's about a quarter of a mile long. I mean, that thing is, very lengthy. But they're flag lots, really what they are. They've got 2 of the lots have 15 feet. Then there's one that's 45 feet, and then the other one, which used to be Dr. Snyder's house, the big house up there. He had a bigger chunk, well, he owned the whole field all the way down to Wells Curtis Road, but all those houses up there are off that driveway. And they just, when they have to seal it or have to do any plowing in the winter, they all chip in and they get the job done, but it's a very loose organization, and I know there have been battles before over somebody not pitching in their fair share, but
Right,
that, none of our concern. I mean, that's just
private.
the way it grew. But we
So-
don't really have anything that says how that could be regulated.
And that's my question. So is the question that's being raised, do we continue to allow that? Or is the question, do we continue to allow that with a more formal homeowners association in place?
It's both.
Or both, all the
It's
above?
both. It's all of the above. And is there a threshold where you do have a private drive? 4 lots, does that kick it into something different? Some other maintenance agreement, some other standard of subbase and width and,
Well,
Going
from minor to major subdivision.
absolutely.
And it's not just subdivisions, it could be a site plan. We got one right now with the Sarah
Yes.
Linda. I mean.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That kicked the
that
new
her
driveway.
doesn't
It doesn't
comply
meet.
with the, fire code
Right.
standards for trucks. She wants
And
to put another
The dilemma
building.
arises, does the town even want to get into that war?
Right.
It's been perpetually happening on Linda. And the budding homeowners do nothing but complain, but it doesn't solve itself.
Right.
And the
You've
way-
seen applications.
And I've seen
we
this, the
saw
way it'll evolve
applications.
is they'll get into a range war with the neighbors, and then they'll come to the town I want you to take over my road,
Yeah.
our road.
Yeah.
And the town's gonna say, no,
We
we're not gonna
can't.
take it over, and then, well, I pay taxes, why can't I have a public road like everybody else? And you get into that, and then you say to them, all right, we'll take it over if you bring it up to standards.
Yeah, well, that's. the
Okay.
point,
Wait,
that
which is, what?
None of them are,
Who's gonna pay,
Right.
who's gonna pay for that to bring it up to standards? So then-
usually they go away then.
So rather than creating that problem, I think you're
Yeah,
trying to
like
head it off.
proactively,
We've got a lot of private roads out there now,
a lot,
common drives.
private
Private.
drives.
And it's
Driveway.
becoming more of an issue than it has been in the past.
Absolutely. Well, I don't know, based on my time here, but. And previously, but I see it all the time. I literally see it every month now, it seems.
And
In some
Anna Linda's a
iteration.
good example of
Anna Linda just
Yeah.
came back
Something's gotta be
and
done
is
before
just resubmitted
one
this
more
week.
nail is driven up there. I
Yeah.
guess.
Those 2 lots are back again. So,
Well, I think we.
These are the two lots that are fronting on Linda,
3 and 4, yeah, lot proposed last.
3 and
meeting.
4 that want to have access off of the private drive.
No, their access is beyond Anna Linda,
Okay,
but there's another one that would create. There's a third that would have access, primary access on the private drive off of Anna Linda,
right.
which would then landlock it, and then it's a whole nother.
You can't create landlocked lots, so. I mean,
Well,
that's
we
a-
have in the past, and that's the precedent.
Well, yeah, well, I
Yeah,
know.
yeah, you're not supposed to
Anyway, we got.
anyways, but
Gary, you
so
gotta run.
that,
I know.
yeah.
Well, it
So
sounds like
maybe
this will be
driveways
on our
will be
agenda
here
for next
soon.
month.
Oh, we're looking for
Yes.
things to do.
I think.
We thought the
town
cemetery
should stay away
conversation
from
was
that.
tough.
You'll
Well,
never solve that
we meet
problem.
on May 2nd and I'll get with Shauna and it sounds like the driveway issue is a big issue that needs to be addressed relatively quickly.
I'll give you one more. Means the sidewalks, remember?
The sidewalks, I had that here on the
Okay.
list too.
Did the ag committee, weren't they asking for some?
Yeah, they were looking for the overlay and stuff like that, but they've taken a different direction now, I believe. I'll know more after the Thursday night meeting, the second Thursday of the month. Because they didn't meet last month. And I think they're looking at different areas of the town somewhat, in regard
Be
to.
protected in some
Protected,
manner.
You said May 2nd is our next meeting?
Yes.
I don't think this committee will ever run out of topics to consider.
Or run across any easier
No,
topics to address.
easier ones have been done.
Motion to meeting be adjourned, please.
Motion.
Made and seconded that meeting be adjourned. All those favors, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Interest, see you next month. 4.